and this is the Nonprofit Corner podcast with your host, Dr. Victoria Boyd. And welcome to the Nonprofit Corner podcast, and this is your host, Dr. Victoria Boyd. And once again, I said, I have a great guest, and her name is Cathy Anderson, and she's from Nashville, Tennessee. Isn't that right, Cathy?
That's right.
Okay. See, I told folks before, I'm international. I had someone she left Canada and she was in Mexico. So now the Nonprofit podcast is an international broadcast. But
Yes.
I am so happy to have you on the podcast. You're also a nonprofit specialist, or you focus on the nonprofit area, and you have I think your company is called All Things Nonprofit. Is that correct?
Well, that's one of those tags that I use, but
Okay.
it is any coaching group.
Okay. So we're going to get to that, but first, I want my listeners to really get to know you. What is your background? How did you get to being in the nonprofit sector? Because I don't think we all woke up saying, I want to be in a nonprofit sector. It's something that, actually pulls at our hearts and it pulls us in. But give us some background of who is Cathy Anderson?
Who is Cathy Anderson? Little old me. I'm in the South, right? Well, it goes way back when. I kind of dispel a lot of the myths I tell everyone. Because actually I might have woke up and said I wanted to be in the nonprofit sector. That's what my mother would say, right? So I was that kid, that only child, long, long time ago, didn't really struggle, none of that. But it disturbed me why other people didn't have what I had. So bringing up to par, like I was just, what they say, I'm unemployable. So I'll have this one side of this entrepreneur mindset of, first job, Old Bengals chicken place. Well, who's making all this money? That's when the entrepreneur bug caught me, because I'm like, okay, I'm seeing all these people order these things and we're not getting paid much. The manager's not getting paid much. So I kept wondering about that. Didn't have anybody really in my environment to ask. And then this other side, I'm seeing people really, really poor. Didn't understand that. So I was kind of an underachiever. So school came easy. All of those kind of things came very easy. And I'm a reader. So once again, fast forward, it came easy. If I don't know it, you read about it. And I realize people don't always tell you the truth. So coming up, I ran into someone that's kind of interesting. Later on, married him, but I always wanted something for seniors. And I'm probably, let me go back a little bit. I've actually gone from pre-med. I said, Mom, those people that go to college, most of those are broke. So someone on one of those little fly-by jobs told me I needed to read Think and Grow Rich. And then at the same time, my mother, she was a scientist. She comes from Meharry, and she gives me this little article that says, you should go take this test as a nurse. Well, I don't know that there's different kinds of nurses. This one was for LPN. I take the test because it was, once again, testing comes easy for me. And I get in there. I was like, it's totally opposite of what I know to do as when you're on this male-dominated field versus this other field. So now all of a sudden I can't do what I know to do. That was a wake-up call. Meet someone, end up getting a home, and learned about group homes. Just ended up in there. I can't even say I had to read to find out, because back then that was before the internet age. I took care of mentally challenged. I'm trying to think of appropriate word now, because we called it something different back then. And that's what I wanted to do, teach them, make sure they can get out and all of that. Didn't know what they call red tape. So, and then the other struggle was the amount of money that was coming through. So it took someone from the agency of housing agency that was over the state of Tennessee. And she said, why don't you get a get a 501c3, and then you can get donations, and there's some other resources I can tap you into to make sure that the residents are covered. Because I'm working overtime and he's working overtime trying to keep the house going, and the people get their little checks. And so I actually sent for the booklet, wasn't on a computer, and got the form. Again, I'm a reader. I filled out about 5 pages, people on the board because that's all that was required in Tennessee. And it got approved in 30 days. So I'm saying all this like I'm happening upon this. Again, I like to get educated. So
Mhm.
I go to the resources. That's where I found out how to run this. They had a nonprofit management back then that still exists. And I noticed that a lot of people just didn't know the right thing. So I started helping other people. Fast forward all of that between nursing, multiple businesses. I've done retail, a lot of little things like that. Now, coming back to Nashville, I've gone to Atlanta, Orlando, back to Nashville, and my mission in 2014 was I'm going to help nonprofit leaders, many of them that look like me, but grassroots, and I'm going to educate no matter what, because that was always a big thing. I got ridiculed for knowing things and pretty much kind of quiet back in the day. So I wouldn't say anything, but I was like, I know what I know that I know. Why don't I turn this into a business? And I learned about coaching. I said, that's what I do. So that's how I came up with the name A&E Coaching Group. So it's business consulting,
Mhm.
but I do specialize in nonprofit organizations. That's
Oh,
me.
great journey. And what it demonstrates is that there's never one straight path to get to where
Mhm.
you are. All of those different experiences help mold you and give you some of the skills, understanding, and knowledge that you need to be effective and to know exactly who it is that you want to serve.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
saw your needs and you say, well, I know there's other people that need that same stuff. So,
Right.
I mean, help them. And that's a lot of what happened to me, being
Mhm.
in the nonprofit sector as, executive director, president of boards and stuff. I
Mhm.
saw those gaps because being an educator, I'm looking for, okay, they need to learn about this and they need to
Mhm.
learn. And so both of us sort of said, there's the gap. How can I fill it? And
Yes.
so it's we have an alignment here. That's how.
We really do.
Yeah, because technically, listeners, we are both what is called nonprofit specialists. She
Mhm.
focuses on certain aspects. In fact, why don't you tell them exactly what you focus on in terms of
Okay.
your specialty
So,
there?
so for me, the gap, and I think I get excited on building things. Like I'm just now learning, oh, I could just buy businesses, and make them better. So the gap that I found and the hard part was starting off. How do we establish this? So I would run into, and I've seemed to attract a lot of faith-based organizations, specifically churches, but I have worked with mosques as well as synagogue leaders. So what I found is that they will operate for 10 years sometime, 15 years, not be able to get the grant funding or get certain further than I thought they should be, having more than 5 years been in existence.
Mhm.
And what I would learn is that sometimes the paperwork just was not done appropriately.
Right. And I've learned because, especially in the religious sector, because they sort of get grandfathered as a 501 or they get
Mm-hmm.
grand as a nonprofit
The
and
nonprofit,
can do
yes.
things without actually filing the paperwork to IRS.
Yeah.
I did a whole blog on, okay, yes, you can get these benefits, but you're not official
Right.
and you can't. For I was speaking of the Google ad grant. If they file and get their 501c3 paperwork determination letter, they're then eligible for the Google ad grant. But you got
Yes.
to have that determination letter. And
Yes.
many religious organizations never apply for that.
Right. And then I noticed in the past few years, even because I didn't realize until just a few years ago that churches could get that 501c3, but some are doing it for religious purposes. So I tell them, your church is the religious purpose, but the nonprofit, and what I've come to find out in other communities, they have two. They have one for the church, and then there's one as a nonprofit. Because I remind everyone, what are most of our hospitals? They're
Yeah,
Catholic,
yeah,
they're
all of the
religious.
yes, all of and
Yeah,
they have different
but it's
codes
not
and
that church. So
yeah,
now we're taking care of the community. Let's make it official for the infrastructure. So I'm a fix it person. I'm a what do they say? Make it right, whatever. when they're in a crunch. So I'm getting these people that sometimes they're almost about to get the money or they didn't get the money,
Yeah.
but it's usually because of those few things. So even for
Yeah.
myself, I designed what I start off with everyone. How can I do this 30-day get grant ready? That's what I'm really focusing on, and I do it with them. So at the
Mhm.
same time, I'm educating on why we're situating this way,
Yep.
why we're doing a certain
Yep.
amount of
I call
board
it getting your
members.
house in order. I have that
Getting the
same,
house in order.
I have
And
that
everybody else, look, the Dr. Victorias, you could have all the rest. No, I love to do that too, but I kind of pick and choose when I want to go all in with that one-on-one. But this is the way that I found that I could actually educate. And like you said, they're not going to be online very long. 45 minutes is enough. So at least we have some action steps that can be done week to week.
Absolutely. And what's most, because I used to get called to do grants, and I used to try to accommodate. I found I lost patience because
You look like me.
they didn't have what they needed. They kept saying, "Oh, it's just So I said, "Okay, do you have your case statement? What is that? Okay, do you have 3 years of financials? No. Okay." And so once they don't have those two things, I don't want to deal with the grant because
Right.
they at that point that means extra work for me.
Yes.
Especially if they don't understand what a case statement is,
Right.
impact statement, what is your demographics, all of that. Yes, I can do that, but they also need to have a lot of that in place. And that's why I actually created that training, getting your house in red. But then I said, you know what, I'm not doing grants anymore because it's too hard for me.
Yeah, they don't understand because unfortunately I find there's a lot of experts, and I'm gonna do it that way, that have, I call it taking the money, because I think if you take money and you don't do that education piece,
Yeah.
so I've had some misunderstand, and I
Well,
can't wait.
I try to show them what is what efforts will give you the best ROI.
Yes,
To me, that's individual donors. Focus on
yes,
individual donors because
yes,
in grants, it's only a 1 in 10 success rate. That
right,
means 1 out of 10 grants out there that you might get.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and unless it's really, already know the grantor and, have an in
right,
and all of that stuff. And so that means staff intensive. Somebody has to sit there and write it. And so you're investing a lot of time. And unfortunately, they're looking at these $1,000 grants, five, especially. And I'm like, okay, count up all of the hours that person took
yes,
to write that grant. You've actually lost money.
yes, yes. Because if you can't write your own mission and vision and the information they're
Yes.
asking for those $1,000 and $500,
Right.
you're right. They've lost money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but grants, I mean, especially for certain, because you're in the healthcare, there are a lot of government grants and things out there. So it also depends on the sector, the
Right.
availability of funding in the community. So yours, is in a great area to explore the grants, which is fantastic. Okay, we need to take a quick break.
All right.
We got so involved here, but okay, Nonprofit Corner listeners, we will be right back. Join the TPF membership program. It's your beacon lighting the way to success. Find it at nonprofitcorner.org. Have you heard about your Nonprofit Corner? Find all the resources you need for professional and organizational growth. That's at nonprofitcorner.org. We are back with the Nonprofit Corner podcast with your host, Dr. Victoria Boyd, and my special guest, Cathy Anderson. We really went sort of deep into some conversations here, but just think about it. For these listeners, all of the great tips that you're hearing about, are you grant ready? Just some of the strategies that you need to think about. Churches, do you have your 501c3? These are all tips that you need to pay attention to. And that's what we're here for, to help educate, bring awareness, and show you some resources. So let's get into some of these questions, because you're the author of How I Opened a Group Home with a Little Cash and a Lot of Passion. And I want to say, I'm going to refer one of my clients to you because she wants to open tiny homes to
Oh,
help house those with mental challenges.
that's good. That's good. I've been in that housing part too. I
So
look
I
at
want
it.
to have her talk to you.
Okay.
But you wrote How I Opened a Group Home with Little Cash and a Lot of Passion. Just
Mhm.
give us some bullet points on that one.
Okay, bullet points. Yes.
No, just talk about it. I don't care.
Okay. So one of the things that stands out, and I've had people say, I wish I read your book first. We think that we can put a house anywhere. So some people will go out there and find a nice house in a nice little area and then try to get licensed as a group home. So I cover that first. It's kind of like what we talk about the marketing and things like that. You have to do your homework. You have to make sure it's in an area. You have zoning laws, you have all of those. That's the big part of knowing where you can have those homes. Now, even with tiny homes, not every city has approved those. So
Yeah.
you have to still do that work
Well,
first.
I know we have because we have several tiny home communities already up and running here.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, you guys kind of set the trend for that. But here in Nashville, and I tell everyone that's why, and we just made a good point too. You have to know your area.
yep,
That sometimes is all the way down to the neighborhood, not just the county or the city. I said because here in Nashville, we're number one, two, and three, depending upon what you read about when it comes to housing. Our median income is 500,000. So if I have a $500,000 house, I don't necessarily, or will, and I'm not saying myself, but other people don't really want mentally challenged there. We don't want substance abuse there. We don't want anything that we consider is lower economic poverty level, whatever their look, if they forget their own family, but whatever their perception is, they don't want that in their neighborhood, right? So that's part of the biggest battle because you're licensing a house, right? And you're providing a service, so it's almost like a business that's inside of a residential community. So some of the things that I have them look at is for communities, when we say before that gentrification process, look at those. There's a lot of private public partnerships now because the government is seeing in every single major city is seeing that that's an issue that they didn't look out for. And a lot of them have sold off the government properties before they recognized this was a problem. So look at those areas that have barely been touched on those main streets, and you have options there. Those places that you see that hotel that's run down, that's closed, you have options there. Think outside of the box on how you can make that impact when it comes to opening that group home. Back then, when I started, it was on the cusp of mental health system being sued. And then I got into it. So it was way more, I'll say then it was a lot of red tape because they were rushing people out of the institutions
yeah,
and trying to get them situated. And that was a big deal then. Now it's recognized. So there's a lot of partnerships that you can do to get that funding, even to start a group home.
yes, I'm definitely gonna have to connect my client with you because I do marketing and stuff like that, but her
Mm-hmm.
her area is, she's in real estate plus she's in mental health.
Okay. Oh,
So it
she's
was
in the
it was a
sweet spot.
natural combination for her, but
Yeah.
you have that background where you've been there, done that,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you could, add more to her thought process
Yeah.
than
I'll just put
you
it
know
together.
yeah,
Sometimes
put it,
when you're
just
in
the
it,
just the
yeah.
system of what or
Yes.
what she even needs to look at. I'm building the website and I can do that. But I know
Well,
what
we
my
need to fill the
specialty is.
place up so
Yeah,
and get the
yeah,
funding. So
yeah. So I let the specialist take over where I know I have a gap, and I'm not ashamed to say that's not my area.
I hear you. We can stay in our own lanes and still work together.
That's absolutely right. So you also made another statement, leading like an introvert. Nonprofit leaders. Okay, you got to explain to me what you mean by that one.
The biggest thing is I am actually an introvert. I think as I gotten older, you know what you know, so you just speak up. You're not gonna say anything, or before I'm just quiet. But I'm still an introvert, meaning that I do like to get out, but I'm satisfied being at home in my corner, reading my books. Yeah, and people think I'm everywhere. So this is what I mean by leading like an introvert. Because I'm that way, I'm going to do a lot of building relationships where most people are going to let it fall. I'm going to follow up a little bit more. I'm going to go on, even, I love the arts. So on any given week, I'm going to find something on Facebook or Eventbrite that I can attend. But while I'm attending, it's still with purpose, I guess I should say, and you draw people. So I'm still leading.
Mhm.
Um, I learned that I have to speak up for whatever I'm representing. So some of my leaders, I encourage them because usually they're not introverts. And like we compartmentalize coming from corporate to all of a sudden we have our own. I was like, it's the same thing. You, like you said, the super donors, those are the people you already know. You have a database.
Right.
I need you to
Use
lead
it.
it and
Yeah.
take charge. And then in your community, we have to understand that we're the community leader, but I also have to get over here to this policy side. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to say I'm endorsing anyone,
Mhm.
but if I'm in education, I need to know who the lobbyists and who that coalition is in my city. I need to know how that works. So I'm leading because I'm a liaison too. And that's the way, to me, it's I'm not going forward and I get embarrassed easy. So I do my research and I know who people are and how to make it work.
Yeah.
And you lead like that introvert does.
And a key thing you said, you do your research because in this day and age of the internet, you can assemble a lot of information and knowledge without
Mhm.
leaving your house,
You can.
And as long as you know how to vet, you can't believe everything that's on it. You
No.
need to know how to vet and to see if what you're reading is what they call a truth checker or whatever they call
Yeah. Go to
it,
the
fact
source.
checker. But there's different ways. And if you just pay attention to how nonprofits are getting most of their information now,
Mhm.
it is via the internet. And
Yeah.
so us, I'm an introvert too. I guess that's why I love podcasting because I can sit here behind my microphone and my screen in my room here
Yes.
and still have an impact,
That's it.
you know,
That's it.
and that's what makes I'm having an impact, I hope, by sharing others' expertise like yours and other guests I
Mhm.
have, by sharing tips, by offering resources, all of that has an impact in our own way.
Right.
And so us introverts here, we can still have external impact.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. I know it's
Okay,
funny
so
when I go to meetings and we talk about that. But if I'm believing in something, like say if it's for homeless or uh, even I guess the biggest I think of is recidivism program, and we go into the rooms, and when they're saying things that are not quite truthful,
yeah,
we get to report on the real way it is,
yeah, yeah,
and that's my passion. And I just think that as leaders, we have to know when to speak up and how are they going to know how the community needs or what they need
yeah.
unless they have someone speaking for them.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to close this segment. I want to remind listeners that Cathy mentioned the grant readiness checklist. I'm going to make sure that that link and how to reach that is attached to this podcast. But I want to thank you all the way from Nashville,
Oh, you're
Tennessee, for being on
welcome.
the Nonprofit Corner podcast. This has been Cathy Anderson and your host, Dr. Victoria Boyd, and that's another edition of the Nonprofit Podcast. See you next time.
See ya.